Hi everyone, I'm Alistair Felix. I've been in the gaming industry for almost a decade now. I've designed for live service games, AAA games, mobile games, you name it. I've been in indie studios all the way to big major studios. I've designed for millions of players. If you want to be a game UX designer, I got you. I put together a Notion doc where I'll link it below. Think of it like a map for your game UX journey, kind of like a strategy guide. I'll break it down into 3 levels. Level 1, what is game UX? Level 2, the skills you'll need on your journey. And then level 3, how to get into the gaming industry. So let's level up together. Level 1, let's talk about what game UX actually is. Game UX is how a player feels as they play. It's how they understand what's happening, how they learn mechanics, and how they get feedback when they interact with the world. It's not what a screen looks like. It's how the whole experience is designed to guide the player without overwhelming them or boring them, if that wasn't your intention. UI is basically what you see. For example, like the health bar, the inventory screen, or the icons. UX is how it feels. How the health bar helps you in a boss fight, or how fast you can open your inventory when you're panicking or about to die. UI is the design. UX is basically the experience of using it. They're not the same, but they do go together. Kind of like player 1 or player 2. They're different roles, but the game's better when they're both working together. Here's the thing. Game UX is still UX. It's grounded in the same principles. Empathy, clarity, structure, and feedback. But every industry has its own language, basically its own context. So let's say if you're a UX designer working in web, you still have to learn things like design systems, accessibility laws, responsive behavior, and web UI patterns. You take your UX knowledge and translate it to fit in the medium. So the same goes for games. You need to understand basic game design fundamentals like progression systems, game loops, player motivation, and even accessibility and controller mapping, because that's the world you're designing for. UX is basically the foundation. Game UX is the application. One of the best frameworks you can bring into game UX is something you might already know, design thinking. And if you don't worry, we're not going to full whiteboard mode, but design thinking is basically a structured way to solve problems with players in mind. So it goes something like this. Empathize, you understand the player, not just what they do, but why they do it. Define. What is the real problem they're facing in the experience? This is where you need to be clear on your problem statement. What are things that hold the player back? Ideate. Brainstorm solutions. This is where you can go crazy, go wild, sketch a bunch, throw everything at the wall. There's no bad solutions. Prototype. Build something fast. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just needs to test the idea. You don't even need fancy software. You could just use pencil and paper. Test. Put this in front of players. You watch them, you learn from them, and you adjust and iterate. This is arguably the most important step because a lot of design, even with systems and structure and foundations, can be quite subjective. This is where you need to use the data and to be data informed to really pitch your designs to other stakeholders. And then you repeat. This part's important. You don't just test once and move on. You loop. You do it all over again until you get to your final solution. This cycle lets you try things early before your team sinks 3 months of implementation time to a system. And the really cool thing about this system is that it works when you're designing a complicated, let's say an onboarding flow for your game or a simple fishing mini game. UX is about solving real problems with real players in mind. Now let's talk about your best ally as a game UX designer. The game designer. When you can collaborate with a game designer, that is where the magic happens. It's never usually 50-50. Oftentimes you do have to lean more game design or lean more game UX, just like a real relationship. But when you can work well together with game design, the game experience magically improves. Game designers think more about the systems, the mechanics, the balance, the challenge and reward loops. The UX designers think about how players interact with those systems and how they learn and how they feel and how they get motivated. So if you're getting into game UX, don't just focus on your UX skills. Learn how to speak the same language as your game design team. Ask questions, watch how they build systems, be curious. The better you understand game design, the stronger your UX will be. Before we dive into the tools and skills, let's ground ourselves a little bit. In level 1, we talked about what game UX actually is, but at its core, UX is really about 3 things. Here are the pillars: clarity, intention, and empathy. Clarity means players always know what's happening and what to do next without needing to pause or even Googling it. Intention means your design serves a purpose. Every interaction, every UI, every moment is there for a reason. And then lastly, empathy is what ties it all together. You understand that the player, not just what they're doing, but how they're feeling, what motivates them to keep going. These 3 pillars guide everything I do in game UX. They may be different for you, but they're the foundation for the skills we're about to cover. So let's jump right in. Flows and wireframes. So in games, flows aren't just for onboarding, they're how players move through complex systems, like the shop system, the inventory system, the quest system, even tutorials. And then wireframes help you structure these visually. So for example, if you're designing a crafting system flow, mapping out item selection, the requirements all the way to confirmation, plus accounting for edge cases, like what happens when your inventory is full or you don't have enough resources. Another example is for a quest selection screen, wireframing how quests are grouped, displayed, or even selected. Do you show rewards first? The difficulty first? What's active? What's already been done? This is all what you need a flow for or wireframes for. So some of the tools that I typically use for this is Figma. FigJam for flows, Miro for flows work as well, but Figma is dominantly your bread and butter. The second skill here I'll cover is whiteboarding. Game UX is messy. You'll often create with game designers, problem solve in meetings, or even whiteboard new systems on the fly. This is why collaboration happens before anything gets designed. So let's say, for example, you're designing maybe a stamina loop and you're trying to brainstorm on different ideas. You're collaborating on how stamina depletes, refills, and gives feedback to the player. What are some visual cues support each state, and even reward screen variants, sketching different ways to show level completion rewards from different difficulty. Is there a simpler animation for easier quests, easier rewards that you get versus more complicated rewards? How grand can you make that celebration? And typically all this is done in Figma as well, even Miro. And lastly, I want to talk about prototyping. You don't need to code, but you do need to communicate how a feature feels. Prototyping really helps you test pacing, the logic, the interaction, especially for bigger game features. Testing whether players can find the right tab. Basically, this is paired with usability testing, and Figma and Unity are great tools for that. And let's talk about soft skills. You'll work with engineers, game designers, producers, artists, you name it, and everyone speaks a different language. Good UX means translating your designs in a way that makes sense for everyone. So let's say, for example, you're presenting a new HUD design to engineers with player behaving reasonings, not just what your design is. You have to understand context. You have to understand how your stakeholders think and talk. It's like aligning with UI designers on how to integrate UI into the world, without breaking immersion. It's also explaining to a producer why you need more time for usability testing to avoid fixing problems later or even in production. Secondly, we talk about strategic thinking. No UX component really exists in isolation. Strategic thinking means understanding how your design fits into a larger game loop, tied into player motivation, the economy, retention, and just overall pacing. An example would be like you're redesigning maybe the daily quest system to reduce friction and support re-engagement. or you're questioning whether a tooltip is covering a deeper onboarding problem, or even helping decide which UX change delivers the most player value given the dev time. And lastly is problem solving. Features shift, bugs happen. A design that worked yesterday breaks today. You have to adapt fast, think critically, and always center the player. Game UX is built on universal UX principles, but the context is always different. It's about designing with clarity, building with intention, and collaborating with empathy inside a world of systems, emotions, and player behavior. If you build these 6 skills, 3 practical, 3 personal, you're already designing and thinking like a game dev. So you've built your skills, you've got your UX toolkit. Now comes the hard part, actually getting into the gaming industry. So let's talk about how to do that, whether you're starting from scratch or switching from another UX job. So there's no really a single way to break in, but here are just 3 solid paths that I thought about. One here is you're already in UX. Whether you're in apps, web, enterprise, awesome. You already know how to design for people. You just need to apply your experience into games. Translate your case studies into more game design foundations. Focus on motivation, feedback loops, anything that is game related that we talked about previously. And even if you're not already in UX, having a different perspective from a different discipline completely can enhance your perspective on UX. There must be a reason why you wanted to switch to UX. For example, one of my closest friends is actually a past fashion designer who now is a very successful UX designer. Her perspective on fashion really improves how she designs for games. Another way is do side projects. There are a lot of game jams, there's a lot of indie teams, even personal redesigns and projects, these count. Like seriously, you don't need a job title to start designing for games. And lastly, look for entry-level positions. A lot of game jam teams actually end up being indie studios. So those are generally the ones that would have much more open UX intern positions or associate UX designer positions. A lot of times, depending on resourcing, a lot of companies would say UI UX. So you might have to do both to stand out. But as the company grows, generally as the industry grows as well, we all cannot be unicorns. But if you want to do both, go for it. So now I want to talk about networking, because here's the truth. Most jobs come from people and not job portals. Find your crew, find your people, join Game UX Discords, LinkedIn groups, attend events like GDC or watch talks online or on YouTube. You'll learn so much and you'll meet people. Also, I would say build in public. Share your work, your redesigns, your sketches, your thoughts on tutorials, making tutorials for people, like anything. People notice consistency, and when you start creating, let's say, content and you're posting online, you start living and breathing the game UX community. And lastly, this might be a general advice, but hype up other people. Ask thoughtful questions. I would say build relationships. Relationships are much better than random DMs. You might happen to end up working with someone that you connected with online. They can be your mentor. They can help you get that referral in. Definitely relationships over random DMs. Lastly is your portfolio and your case studies. You don't want to get hired to start building. My advice to you is to start now. You could pick a feature in a game, break it down, redesign the game UI, use yourself as the target audience. I'm pretty sure you played a game where you felt frustrated. Ask yourself, why were you frustrated? Use yourself as a target audience. And once you figure out what the problem was, redesign the feature. Come up with your own solutions. There's always games out there where you can analyze the UX features. You can also think about it more in the type of genre of game you would like to get in, what platform, mobile games, each game has its own constraints and problem space. So this is a great way to start thinking more like a game UX designer as an expert, rather than just someone who plays games for fun. And lastly, I would say is level up your skills. We talked about some of the hard skills and some of the soft skills. You want to improve your efficiency in using Figma, using Miro, for example. Great way to find out what tools to use is look up a dream job at your dream company. Look at the job description and look at what they list as tools. Get really good at those tools. A lot of the job is very technical. So once you get really comfortable getting used to using Figma or Miro or even a game engine, these are all going to get you closer to get that job. You know, this industry is weird. Sometimes you apply to 50 places and you hear nothing. Sometimes you get a maybe and that turns into them ghosting you. But if you keep designing, sharing, and connecting, you're leveling up. And one day you'll realize you weren't waiting to become a game UX designer. You already were one. So if you made it this far, I just want to say I'm proud of you. This stuff can feel overwhelming, but you're showing up, you're learning, and you're trying. And that's more than enough. So whether you're building your first wireframe or applying to your 10th job, you are not alone. If you found this helpful, drop a like, share it with someone who needs it. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them or even turn it into another video. And don't forget to check out my Notion doc I made, your strategy guide for your game UX journey. It's totally free to download and the link is below. I hope this video was helpful and I can't wait to hear about your game UX journey. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.